Something strange happened that night, something she couldn't quite understand. It was late and the house was quiet, except for the faint sound of the wind outside. She was standing in the kitchen when he walked in, his presence filling the room like a heavy, unspoken tension. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there watching her. She tried to brush it off, to pretend it wasn't bothering her, but something in the way he looked at her made her skin crawl. It wasn't the first time his gaze had felt this intense, but that night was different. There was something behind his eyes, something dark, something she couldn't name. He told her she should have noticed, and she had. She just didn't know what to make of it. She couldn't tell Kaya. How could she explain it? How could she put into words the feeling of being watched? Not with affection, but with something colder, something far more unsettling. She tried to push it out of her mind, to pretend it was nothing. But then, later that night, something happened that made her realize it wasn't nothing. He was closer than she expected, too close, in a way that made her feel trapped. He said nothing, but his proximity spoke volumes. It was then she realized, whatever it was real. And now she couldn't escape it, couldn't pretend anymore. But it was too late. What she hadn't seen was already unfolding, too fast for her to stop, and she was too afraid to face what that meant. A few days after Malik's return, Tiffany suggested a family outing to a park by the lake. It was Sunday and the whole family was supposed to spend time together. The sun was warm and a light breeze drifted across the water. Tiffany chatted cheerfully on the phone, while Malik and Kaya walked slightly behind her. Kaya tried to keep her distance, but there was something about Malik's presence that unsettled her. It had been days since he returned, and his silent, brooding nature had already started to erode her sense of comfort. As they walked along the path, Kaya couldn't help but notice how Malik kept his head down, absorbed in his own world, his earbuds still in place. She couldn't understand why he would shut them out, especially today. The air was light, the park full of people enjoying the early spring weather. But Malik was distant. She stopped walking for a moment, eyeing him with a mix of frustration and confusion. She didn't know why, but she felt the need to address him. She snapped at him, her voice sharper than she intended. "Why don't you take off those headphones? We're supposed to be together." She watched him for a moment, hoping for some acknowledgement. He slowly pulled the earbuds from his ears and turned to her. His expression remained blank, but something in his gaze froze her. It was almost as though he was measuring her, sizing her up in a way that made her skin prickle. The silence between them stretched for a moment before he spoke, his voice barely audible but carrying an intensity that sent a shiver through her. "Don't you get it?" His words were soft but filled with an undeniable weight, as if he were speaking not just to her, but to something deeper, something unspoken. Kaya froze, momentarily caught off guard by the sudden sharpness in his tone. After that day, the tension between them only grew. Malik began appearing where she least expected him, standing silently in the corner of the room, watching her when she wasn't looking. His presence was always there, lurking in the background like a shadow that wouldn't leave her side. He followed her movements, his eyes fixed on her whenever they were in the same space, his gaze unsettling, almost possessive. Kaya started feeling like a stranger in her own home, like every space she inhabited was being quietly observed. She couldn't shake the feeling that Malik was always there, in the periphery, watching, waiting for something she couldn't understand. She didn't know what to make of it, but it made her anxious, uneasy. The house, once a refuge, now felt like a cage, and with each passing day, it seemed to get harder to ignore. The tension between Kaya and Malik had been building for days, and it had reached a breaking point. Every glance, every silent moment between them felt loaded with unspoken words. Kaya could no longer ignore the strange sense of unease that had been creeping up on her. It was as if the air around her had become thick, suffocating. Each time she entered a room, she could feel Malik's presence, even when he wasn't physically there. His silence seemed to speak louder than anything he could say. One night she was woken by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that made every small sound seem amplified. Kaya rubbed her eyes, disoriented from the sleep that still clung to her, and listened. The footsteps stopped, and she felt a wave of unease wash over her. She couldn't just lie there, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. She slowly slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and walked toward the hallway. As she turned the corner, she saw him. Malik stood by the window, his back to her, his gaze fixed on the darkness outside. There was something unsettling about his stillness, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Kaya's heart raced and her steps faltered. She tried to steady her breathing, but the sight of him standing there, silent and unmoving, sent a shiver down her spine. She stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Something in the air felt thick, heavy, almost oppressive. She stepped closer, her feet making no sound on the wooden floor, and reached out. Her hand brushed against his shoulder, a tentative gesture. But before she could pull back, Malik's body jerked and he spun around quickly, his eyes flashing with an intensity that caught her off guard. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but the threat in it was unmistakable. "Don't touch me." The words hung in the air, filled with a quiet power that made Kaya freeze in place. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, her body momentarily paralyzed by the force of his words. What did he mean? Why did he speak to her like that? The words didn't just sound like a warning. They carried something darker, something that felt personal. Kaya took a step back, her mind racing. His gaze had shifted, no longer just cold but heavy with something else. The weight of his stare seemed to pierce through her, like he was searching for something inside her, something that made her skin crawl. She didn't know what he wanted, but she could feel that it wasn't just about the touch, it was about control. She could see it in the way he stood, in the way his eyes held her, like he was the one in charge now. Her blood ran cold as the realization settled in. This wasn't just about his silence or his presence in the house. There was something more, something deeper, and she wasn't sure she was ready to face it. The days that followed passed in a suffocating silence. Malik's presence was constant, unyielding. It was as if he was always in her space, watching her, even when he didn't speak. Kaya tried to ignore him, to go about her day without acknowledging the mounting tension that hung between them. But his words kept echoing in her mind. His gaze burned into her thoughts. "You want me," he had said, the words haunting her more with each passing moment. She didn't know what to make of them or why he said it, but the certainty in his voice unsettled her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was unfolding, something she wasn't prepared to face. One evening after a long day at work, Kaya returned home. She stepped through the door expecting the usual silence of the house. But there he was, Malik, sitting on the couch, staring at her. His eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. His gaze seemed to strip her bare, and for a moment she felt vulnerable, exposed. She froze in the doorway, unsure of what to do. Her heart beat faster, and the air around her felt thick, heavy with tension. He didn't say anything at first. His eyes never left hers. It was as though he was waiting for her to speak, to break the silence that had settled between them. But she couldn't. She was too afraid to move, too afraid to even breathe. Finally he spoke, his voice deeper than usual, colder. "Are you afraid of me?" His words were low, like a threat whispered in the dark. Kaya took a step back, her mind racing. His voice had changed. There was no warmth, no trace of kindness. It was as if he had become something else, something unrecognizable. Her pulse quickened and her stomach tightened with fear. She wanted to run, to escape, but her body was rooted to the spot. Malik stood up slowly, his movements deliberate, almost predatory. Every step he took brought him closer to her, and with each movement, the air grew thicker, more oppressive. Kaya's instincts screamed at her to leave, to get away, but her feet wouldn't move. It felt like her body was betraying her, reacting to his proximity in ways she couldn't control. As he closed the distance between them, Kaya clenched her fists, fighting the urge to tremble. She couldn't stay here any longer. She couldn't endure this any longer. The thought of running, of leaving, finally broke through her panic. She took a deep breath, and with a burst of resolve, she turned on her heel and headed for the door. She couldn't stay in this house, not with him watching her like that, not with the suffocating weight of his presence closing in around her. But as she reached for the door, she could feel Malik behind her. His gaze followed her every move, and she knew, without turning around, that he was still there. And though she was terrified, there was something else, something she couldn't quite explain, something that kept her from leaving. Kaya packed her things in haste, the weight of her decision pressing down on her chest. She couldn't stay here any longer. The house, once a place of comfort, had become a prison, and Malik had become its warden. Every corner seemed to hold a memory of him, his gaze, his presence, his words that refused to leave her mind. She knew she had to go, that she couldn't live like this anymore. But even as she gathered her belongings, she couldn't escape the sense of something unfinished, something unresolved. As she reached for the door, ready to leave it all behind, her eyes met his. Malik stood silently in the doorway, watching her with that unnerving, steady gaze. His silence spoke volumes, and Kaya froze, unable to move. He hadn't said a word, but his presence alone felt like an impenetrable barrier. She tried to ignore the chill that ran through her as he stood there, unblinking, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "Don't go!" His voice finally broke the silence. It was quiet, almost casual, but in those few words, Kaya felt a sense of finality. It wasn't a plea, nor was it a command. It was something in between, something that made her hesitate, made her second-guess her resolve. She took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. Could she really leave? The thought of walking out that door felt impossible now, as if the very act of leaving would shatter something deeper within her. Her body trembled, a mixture of fear and something else, something she couldn't name but could feel intensifying with each second she stood there. Malik's eyes didn't leave hers. He didn't speak again, but the air around them seemed to grow heavier, thicker. Slowly he walked toward her, his movements deliberate, and Kaya's breath caught in her throat. She tried to retreat, but her feet wouldn't obey. She was frozen, rooted to the spot by the weight of his presence. When he reached her, he lifted his hand slowly, almost as if he were testing the air between them. His fingers brushed against her wrist, and the touch was electric, sending a shock through her body. Kaya jerked back, but the feeling lingered, the warmth of his touch almost searing her skin. Her heart raced, her pulse quickening with a mixture of fear and something darker that she couldn't quite grasp. She wanted to pull away, to run, but the space between them felt impossibly small. He was right there, his proximity overwhelming her. Every instinct told her to leave, to get away, but every fiber of her being screamed at her to stay. In his presence, she felt both trapped and drawn to him, and it was the most terrifying thing she had ever experienced. Her resolve crumbled, and she felt the last remnants of her willpower slip away. She turned her face away, her breath shallow, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The room seemed to close in around her, and the door she had been so determined to open now felt like a distant memory. The power he had over her was undeniable, and it left her powerless, standing there, unable to escape. That evening, Kaya made a decision she hadn't anticipated. She didn't leave. She stayed, though every part of her screamed to run. She sat there, in the silence of the house, her mind racing, trying to understand what was happening to her. Malik's presence loomed over her thoughts, his words echoing in the stillness. She couldn't shake the image of his eyes, his touch, the way he had looked at her as if he owned her, as if she were something to be controlled. She was terrified, but she couldn't stop herself from thinking about him, from wanting to understand why she was so drawn to him despite the fear that gripped her. The next morning, Tiffany acted as if nothing had changed. She went about her usual routine, smiling, chatting, unaware of the tension that had taken root in the house. It was as if nothing had shifted, as if nothing had happened. Kaya watched her mother, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what she was hiding. How could she explain it? How could she make Tiffany understand the storm that raged inside her, the confusion and fear, and the undeniable pull toward Malik? Kaya couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't ignore what was happening between her and Malik, the strange magnetic force that bound them together in ways she couldn't explain. She felt torn, caught between the fear that had overtaken her and the strange, overwhelming desire she couldn't deny. What was it? Was it love? Was it manipulation? Or was it something even darker, something that couldn't be labeled? She didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at her, leaving her more lost than before. Her mind swirled with conflicting thoughts and emotions. She was on the edge, unsure of where to turn, unable to see a clear way forward. She knew that she couldn't continue to live in this confusion, but she also knew that leaving would not be as simple as walking out the door. She had already crossed a line, and the consequences of that line were still unfolding. In her heart, she felt that perhaps she would be the one to carry the secret, the one who would leave it hidden in the family, buried beneath layers of silence and denial. But could she ever forget the way he had looked at her? Could she ever erase the feeling of his touch, the weight of his gaze? It was impossible to say. The secret of what had transpired between them would linger, whether she acknowledged it or not. And for now, that was the only truth she could hold on to, because the rest was still too uncertain, too tangled to untangle just yet.